It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. That's what I've been saying nearly every day to Dawn as we're out walking the dogs. This is really my favorite time of the year in our neighborhood in Duncansville, where we moved 3 years ago. You can see spring being birthed every day by day, as colors change and trees blossom. Because it was about 2 weeks ago now, we saw the green come out on the willow tree at the end of our block, which is always the first sign of the arrival of spring. The color is still thin and reedy, but now we get to appreciate how it changes every time we walk by. Late last week, overnight, all the forsythia came out, and I always look for this because it's gone all too soon. And the very next day, we saw the first yellow of the daffodils all over the neighborhood. This past Monday, the rich colors of the cherry blossoms emerged. And then this Tuesday, the huge maple tree in our backyard, just beyond the back deck, stirred awake. And yesterday morning, the pear trees started showing their pure whiteness, all up and down the street, lining and defining our street. I can count the coming of spring day by day in our neighborhood as Mother Nature unveils each of her beauties hidden all these months. It really makes me feel like every day is a gift. It's unique and precious and fleeting. It's a gift that deserves my attention and my gratitude. Each day this time of year is a cause for blessing in the neighborhood and also on the Jewish calendar. Now, we know how important marking days and counting time is for Judaism, right? Think of all the important time intervals in the Torah. 3 days between God dispatching Abraham to Mount Moriah and his arrival there to prepare to sacrifice and then save his beloved son, Isaac. 3 days that the Israelites were given to prepare at the foot of Sinai for God's great revelation. 7 days of creation, including this gift of Shabbat. 40 days to get the ark ready for a whole new world. 40 years in the wilderness to earn entry into the promised land. And in this week's Torah portion, 8 days of communal celebration, culminating in Yom Shemini, the 8th and final day on which the high priests were ordained and sanctified into God's service at the tabernacle in the wilderness. The Torah and Jewish tradition give us all sorts of time passages in which there are it's our time to move and prepare and change. But perhaps no interval of time is more important than the one in which we find ourselves now. These 7 weeks from the onset of Passover to the festival of Shavuot mark one of the most important periods of time in our history. The days from the salvation of a ragtag bunch of slaves and hangers-on from the bondage in Egypt to the creation of Israel as a nation at the foot of Mount Sinai, as we acknowledged God's greatness, witnessed God's power, and bound ourselves to God's sovereignty. The Torah tells us, and from that day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation offering, the day after the Sabbath, you shall count off 7 weeks. They must be complete. You must count until the day after the 7th week, 50 days. And then she'll bring an offering of new grain to the Eternal. The rabbis identify this Sabbath as the first day of Passover, which the book of Exodus describes as a Mikra Kodesh, a holy occasion. Now, the Torah itself describes this interval only as the time period between the first grain offering of early spring and the one made later at the peak of the spring harvest. But over time, Shavuot became identified with the giving of Torah on Sinai, laying a historical narrative of time over the agricultural one. And so the counting of time until the sheaf offering, Sfirat HaOmer in Hebrew, now takes on a special and sacred meaning. We count these days one by one in remembrance of the journey that our ancestors made from Egypt to Sinai. But it's not just a physical journey, it's a spiritual one. It was the prep time, if you will, that God gave the Israelites to start shedding their slave mentality and start thinking of themselves as a united and liberated people. And that way they would be ready and worthy to accept Torah and the divine covenant at Sinai. Let's face it, we can all use a little time to take on our own spiritual journeys. And we too can use the counting of the omer to do that. Day by day, when I walk through the neighborhood, I account for the small changes around me. Day by day, as we count the omer, we can try to account for the changes, the emotional growth we want to see in ourselves. It's like a mirror image of the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah on the opposite side of the Jewish annual calendar. But I think that Sefirat HaOmer takes on special significance this year because we have been counting day by day, week by week, month by month, now into a second year of the bondage of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have been taking stock of the toll that it's taken on us physically and emotionally, socially, financially. And we have been counting up all the ways that we have adjusted and adapted and triumphed over trials large and small, from the ever-changing technical rules of Zoom to the challenges of safely shopping for groceries. We have been doing all we can to come out of the shadow of this deadly virus, isolating, masking, washing, now inoculating. And we know that we are so very close to our own liberation. We can see it in the bursting of color. We can smell it in the sweetness of the air. We can feel it in our skin from the warmth of the sun. And so for us, as much as for our ancestors, this year's Omer count can take us on a journey to a place of healing of both body and spirit. So as we prepare to do tonight's Omer count together, let us imagine it as one more step toward our own Sinai. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer. Blessed are you, eternal our God, sovereign of all the worlds, who has made us holy with your mitzvot and commanded us concerning the counting of the Omer. Hayom shlosha asar yom, shehem shavuot achad, v'shisha yamim la'omer. Today is the 13th day, making 1 week and 6 days of the Omer. Let this be one step away from sickness and fear, and one step more toward our freedom. And let us say together, Amen.